Welcome to the Hoopstrology podcast, brought to you by the Bayesian. My name is Jesus Acevedo Jr.
And this is the Zodiac GM.
And we are your hosts for this one-of-a-kind podcast that's a mixture of a sport that we love, Zodiac basketball, and astrology, which is something that you are deeply interested in. You have deeply done your research, and you have a PhD, I was saying, in astrology, Zodiac GMs. Because when I first brought up the idea to you to do a podcast of this kind, do you feel like it was just the next gradual step of your evolution as you've learned to, marry basketball and astrology?
Definitely. I think it's a great opportunity to present a new platform in astrology to implement to basketball. I mean, it's different. It's sort of unheard of, right? When people first hear about it, they're like, "What is this guy talking about?" And yes, it's okay, because it's understood. It's misunderstood right now. A lot of people know too much about astrology. Some do, some don't. But hey, astrology is all about chemistry, right? Chemistry between two individuals or a group. But what if you mix chemistry into an organization such as the NBA and see how it affiliates or coordinates with with team chemistry or even an individual form. So yeah, it's a brand new platform. It's definitely very, very different. I think it's one of a kind for sure. So I think bringing this type of analytics into the game is huge. That's just my opinion.
It's definitely I think about it as just another wrench in the analytical tool belt. You have your stats and your numbers analytics that tell one story of the game. You have your eye test, that gives you a different angle to the game. And I think looking at it at these basketball games through astrology, I think it's just another different way to analyze the game. And I think it comes back down to what you say, chemistry. And something that I want to point out is I wanted to ask you about, because you've told me this off the podcast, and I feel it's important to mention, is that the reason why you've been into astrology since you were like elementary year age. I know I can say that much, but when you start to think about it and putting it into sports, that was when the Houston Rockets, right, 2017, when they had James Harden, Chris Paul, Clint Capella, Mike D'Antoni, and they won 65 games. What was it about that team that made you think, I wonder they're all astrologically connected? What made you want to look more into that?
Well, they were doing good. I mean, just before the season started, people were talking about, oh, it's not going to work out with James Harden and Chris Paul. They're too ball dominant, this and that. Even myself, I was like, I don't think it's going to work out. It's going to be kind of odd. They started playing, started winning, started beating good teams. And I just started questioning. I'm like, wow, how are they getting along so well? Why is there
So fast too,
chemistry
right?
so
Like so
good? Yeah,
fast.
it's sort of like a shocking. And it just seemed like when I watched the game, yes, the offense was zoned towards James Harden, but as a team, they were doing very good. And it was just so much fluidity. They were just dominating games. So I started looking up their horoscope signs, their zodiac signs. And then one thing I found that was very interesting was, I would say about 90% of that roster was a specific element type that was compatible to each other. And that kind of raised the little light bulb, and I was like, what if? What if? Start questioning, what is chemistry? Why can't I implement this into basketball? Why not? So that's where it all started.
So 2017 Houston Rockets. So that's what we're talking about. 6 seasons in now, deep, where season after season since 2017, you've kind of analyzed how teams are put together and how they perform on the court, and then you also created a spreadsheet to track the movement of teams, which then tells you how compatible they are. Is that correct?
Definitely, definitely. So I just started organizing a little bit, right? And of course, this whole idea is not 100%, oh, just because they're very compatible, they're going to do good, right? No, it's like you mentioned before, it's just a small ingredient to include your analytics to analyze a whole team, right? But I started realizing the correlation is pretty strong. I would say more than 50% in my opinion, which is good, right? But of course, you still have to do your due diligence. You still have to scout the talent, the experience, the health. Everything else still has to fall in place. But if you include this whole zodiac chemistry into your analytics, it just kind of opens your eyes to another level. So in the past 6 or 7 years, I've had spreadsheets of each and every single team, each and every single player, and I analyze it that way to see, hey, they have a good potential to be good. If they're healthy or if they're coached, this and that. And then of course there's so much dynamics into a team, right? That makes them successful or not. But it does help to analyze a team.
So what we wanted to do, faithful listeners, and I say faithful listeners, this is our first episode. I'm hoping we have some faithful listeners already. It's what we're hoping to do is kind of give you you know, teach you guys a little bit about the zodiac signs and how Zodiac and myself look at this game. So just to start off, before we get into some NBA current topics, let's just remind people about how many zodiac signs there are.
Just to break it down, right?
Just to break it down
So
right now, this is it.
this is the common knowledge, right? The zodiac signs. So there's 12 zodiac signs, right? So you break them down into four groups, which are the elements, right? So each element has three signs. So what's 4 times 3? 12, right? So you have the water element, you have the earth element, and then you have the fire element, and you also have the earth element. So there's three signs in each of those elements. So that's just the basic understanding. And it's a sun sign that I look for, which is the core personality of an individual, right? A lot of you guys know what your sign is, right? You look it up through the internet. Oh, I'm an Aries. Oh, I'm a Leo, or whatever sign it is. And then I bet you anything that curiosity phase kicks in. Who am I compatible with? Oh, what is a Taurus compatible with? I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys out there do that already. But this is a little bit deeper than that, right? Because you're analyzing it and see how it fits within a team, how certain individuals or stars fits in a team, and you kind of mold it into a whole team and see if that team as a whole is compatible or not.
Okay. And now what else? There's also another element, right? That
Yes,
plays into the sorry, there's another category that plays into the elements, whether
correct.
it's a fire, air, wind, earth, which I feel like I'm Captain Planet, right? Like, we're hard, it's almost there,
Yes,
right?
there's modalities and qualities, right? It's another level, right? And not a lot of people know too much about this part, but they have the mutable signs, they have the cardinal signs, and then the fixed signs. Now, each modality has certain traits that coincides with another element or another trait or another sign that's either compatible or not, or could work or not. And it's sort of like you kind of mix it into a bucket and kind of get, okay, just because they're this particular quality, they have a good opportunity to make things work or not, right? So fixed signs tend to be a little bit more stubborn, but they're very consistent, dependable. Mutable signs are very flexible. The Geminis, the Sagittarius, and then going back to fixed signs real quick, Leos, Aquarius, Scorpios, and such, right? And then you have the cardinal signs, which are more like the leaders, right? The initiators. And then just a few examples, you have the cancers are cardinal signs, and Aries, just to name a few. But we'll dig deeper as the episodes go on, just to kind of build and kind of learn and build that knowledge overall.
And so, what's interesting is that as you were breaking down, over the past 6, 7 seasons, breaking down teams by their signs, how accurate were you seeing that the chemistry that you saw on your spreadsheet was equating to teams being good on the court?
Well, from what I've discovered, I mean, this is just off of my research and my opinion. There was a fairly high percentage. Of course, nothing is ever 100%, right? But I've seen a strong case where anywhere range from 60%, 80%, as much as 80%, and that's very, very good, right? And then you start just combining everything else and how everything works. And that's kind of how I see things, right? So so yeah, it's definitely there. More than half percent for sure.
More than 0.5%. So now that
I
we're
mean,
giving you
sorry, more than 50% for sure.
more than more than 50%. So as
Not
we
half.
continue on, not half, no, no. So as we continue with this episode, now we kind of want to, marry some of these topics these astrological, terms and put it into basketball sense. So the next topic that we want to hit you guys with on this first episode of the Hoopstrology podcast is we're going to look at some teams that may fly under the radar, but that will be good based on astrology. Now, granted, something else that needs to be said is, astrology is just one component, right? Just because a team has signs that'll gel doesn't mean that they're automatically going to be good. It's just another way to analyze them. But here are two teams that I know you pointed out to me, Zodiac, and they're interesting because these two teams were last place in the Eastern Conference. We're talking about the Detroit Pistons and the Charlotte Hornets. The Detroit Pistons were 17-65 last season. They entered this season with a new head coach in Monty Williams, and you are very high on this team. So, why are you high on the Detroit Pistons? Break it down for us.
I'll tell you why. Okay, so here's a simple breakdown, right? When I analyze the Detroit Pistons, the key factor is their head coach, the new signing of Monty Williams, right? So Monty he's a Libra. Okay. So the thing we gotta understand when I look at the team as a whole is how many signs are compatible to Monty Williams, right? And just right off the bat, I can name 5 potential starters, 4 or 5, depending on who their center is going to be, and I'll mention that a little bit. They have James Wiseman. He's an Aries, compatible Monty Williams, right? They have Isaiah Stewart, Gemini, compatible Monty Williams. Bojanovic, Aries. Jaden Ivey, Aquarius, and Cade Cunningham, Libra. Okay. And the reason why I say that, because if you look at air and fire, those two elements mix very well together, sort of like understanding each other's, understanding the language. They speak the same language, right? And on the other side, you have the earth and water, the earth and water elements, they speak their own language on their side. So they both understand their own language, right? And it's when you mix them up, it's sort of kind of like a misunderstanding. But that's how I get the basics out of the way. So their potential starting 5 are very compatible to Monty Williams, and that's a big deal because when you have 5 starters on the floor at the same time, they tend to understand each other a lot quicker, and it's less conflict, less friction, and it tends to go a lot more smoother. A couple examples last year, Milwaukee Bucks were like that, Denver Nuggets were like that, and guess what? They were number 1 in the league, right? And they were the best Zodiac chemistry team that analyzed last year. So this year, I see that in the Pistons. And the reason why I think they might be a little bit confident because Jalen, of course, there's Duran, right? He's a Scorpio. He's a water sign. He might be the starter over Wiseman. It just depends. If he is, that's still fine because they have 4 starters that are compatible on the floor. Even though Duran is not compatible, it still could work because there's still a heavy load of minutes to flow around throughout the game that's compatible. And then Monty Williams is the head coach. They all have the same understanding, especially for young players like Cunningham and Ivy. And I think that's the reason why I feel like they're going to be a team to watch.
Now, those are some very brave words. We're talking about a team that went 17-65. Now, do you think they're so well balanced that they could maybe make a playoff run? I think that's if the Detroit Pistons make the playoffs, that will just show that this is more true than it has any reason for being, right?
Well, of course, but you can't predict nothing's like 100%, right? But they have a good shot, in my opinion.
I think it could be something that kind of a building year for them, where they see, hey, there's some good stuff here. We're clicking. We got the offense down. We're clicking. We just need to figure out other stuff, right? Because the Eastern Conference, there's some tough teams, but I could easily also see, like as I'm looking at the Eastern Conference, I could easily see the Raptors not making the playoffs and maybe Pistons sneaking, or even the Bulls, But again, we're talking about 17-win teams, so I think just maybe this team having a lot of chemistry astrological wise will give them on to good, winning streaks that they can then build off for next season, because I think something that I also noticed that Cade Cunningham, which is, their number 1 guy, is the same sign as the coach. Both are Libras, right? And sometimes, not always, but sometimes two of the same signs don't mesh well, but sometimes they do. And in this case, Libra and Libra mesh well.
Definitely. And I only say that they do because if you think about Libra as a cardinal sign, what I mentioned about cardinal signs are natural leaders, they're initiators, right? So they're sort of like the alpha in a sense, right? So if you tell them to lead, they're going to naturally know how to lead in their own way. So since Libra is an air element, so they lead by communication, ideas, that's sort of like their strength, right? But think about it this way, if you have two Libras at the same time trying to control one thing, it's so they could work, yes, but if they have a disagreement, that's when conflict might rise because they want to overstep the other individual, But if they sacrifice, of course, I believe this team will, then that's where the good side comes out. But overall, it's still a very, very strong synergy as a team, if healthy, of course, if healthy.
If healthy.
So yes,
Another team that if they're healthy, they just have the potential, and that's the Charlie Hornets. They were
yes,
hit with a lot of injuries last season. 2 seasons ago, they made the playoffs. So last season, they were 27 and 55. And this is another one of your teams that you feel is now better connected astrological wise, that they could potentially have a bounce back season similar to what they had 2 seasons ago when they made the playoffs.
definitely. Bingo, you hit it on spot. Two factors that I look at, Brandon Miller, a big sign. He's a very talented 2 or 3 or whatever you want to call him, a two guard or even small forward, but he fits very well with LaMelo Ball. So Brandon Miller, he's a Sagittarius. LaMelo Ball is a Leo. They're both fire signs, right? So they mesh very, very well. But not only that, their qualities meshes very well, right? LaMelo Ball is a fixed sign, which is a Leo, and a mutable sign is Sagittarius. So if you combine two fire elements that are compatible as well with their qualities, it makes things work, right? Not only that, they have Mark Williams, who's also a Sagittarius, right? And another potential starters, just because it just depends on who they're going to start. If they end up starting Miles Bridges, who's an Aries, that's what I call the trifecta. And what I mean by that is because they're all in the same element. You have the fire element in Aries, fire element in Leo, and fire element in
What's Steve Clipper?
Sagittarius.
What's the coach?
Okay, so that's one thing. So Clifford, he's a Virgo. Okay, he is a
Interesting.
Virgo. So one thing about Virgos is that yes, they're mutable sign. They're flexible, which I think could work also. So I'm keeping an eye and see how he uses his rotation because I have a feeling that he might end up starting PJ Washington over Miles Bridges, which I think rightfully so, because Bridges has gone through some issues and, they want to slowly bring him up if he deserves the minutes and so forth, whatever it is. And also Terry Rozier, he's a Pisces, right? So those two individuals, which I mentioned, Washington and Rozier, are opposite of all the fire elements I just mentioned. So that could create a little bit of conflict, but the good thing about it is they are mutable signs. They're flexible. They're willing to adjust on the go. And I think that alignment's a little bit better than say if they were a fixed or a cardinal, but it could still work. I think their maximum, the optimal potential would be to start Bridges and Hayward because they're all compatible together, all fire signs. The reason why I mentioned starters right off the bat because what they play majority of the minutes
Right, right.
throughout the year, right? So you got to look at the dynamics of that as well. So yeah, so I think they have a very sneaky shot of even making the playoffs or even better. But this is just potential, and of course, health as well, right? So
Health always
we'll see.
matters. Health. So the Charlotte Hornets and the Detroit Pistons, two of the teams you think would be the most underrated. We'll see. We'll definitely keep an eye out as the season progresses. How the Detroit Pistons and the Charlotte Hornets do. Some another team that I'm not just me and us Zodiac, but I think the whole basketball world, basketball galaxy will be keeping an eye on is Frank Vogel as he enters his first year with the Phoenix Suns. Now he's one of the coaches that you think just meshes so well with his roster, which is unfair to say because I mean, what coach isn't going to get along with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, right? Well, I mean,
Yeah, you're
it'd be
right.
hard, but it just so happens that, like you've told me, that he meshes, right? Frank Vogel meshes
Yes.
with this Phoenix Suns roster, but I imagine it's more than just Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. I imagine he meshes with everybody else too.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's a right fit. I see him as a better fit than Monty Williams, right? Because Frank Vogel, he's a Cancer, right? That's his zodiac sign. So he meshes very, very well with Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Eric Gordon, just to name a few. And those are three key players on that team, right? Now he is opposite element. I say element, right? Of Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, he's a Libra Cardinal. And what I say again with Cardinals, they're natural go-getters, initiators, leaders, right? He is opposite of Kevin Garnett, but talent is talent. You
Kevin Durant.
can't go. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Kevin Durant. Apologize, but talent is talent. This team is loaded with talent. So I mean, what do you say? I mean, they're going to be a very, very good team. And I can see the Phoenix Suns if they utilize some sort of like staggered rotation where they utilize Kevin Durant sort of like the go-to guy with some of the role players off the bench, and then utilize Booker and Beal and Gordon specifically, and even include Nurkic. Nurkic is it's an upgrade, a big upgrade over Ayton because of their sign. Ayton was a Leo, right? And then Nurkic is a Virgo. Virgos are compatible to Frank Vogel, which is a Cancer. Now, if Ayton was there, he is opposite of what Frank Vogel is, right? So he's a huge upgrade there. So at least four of the potential starting five, because I'm still not sure if they're going to start Eric Gordon or not. It might be a Koji or someone else. I'm not sure. But overall, as a core with their starters, it's a very, very good synergy as well. So I think Frank Vogel is a perfect fit for that team.
And I think even just looking at the team, you already see how they're all connected with each other, clicking, in the early preseason games that we've seen. Another team that welcomed a new coach is a team that is trying to get out of the cellar of the NBA. For the past 3 seasons, they've been the bottom dwellers. We're talking about the Houston Rockets, our hometown Zodiac GM, our hometown team. They hired Ime Udoka he was with Boston Celtics. He left. He was let go, so he joins the Houston Rocket team, looking to get back into contender status. And the Rockets, will do a deeper dives on them on another podcast, hopefully here soon, that you guys will be hearing about from us. But we do want to mention him, Ime Udoka, and how he fits in with the Houston Rockets. Now, it's not all like a love connection, right? So it's mixed mash, so it could work. It could not, right? What can you tell us about this relationship?
The Houston Rockets, Ime Udoka, first of all, he's a Leo sun, right? He's that's his zodiac sign, right? So it's sort of like a wild card. That's just the way I look at the Houston Rockets. And the reason why, because the transition from last year to this year, they made a couple changes here and there, but the pieces that I feel, or the energies that I feel that would really help them, were only upgraded on the role players. And that's just my opinion, right? And what I mean by that is that the Rockets are stacked with a lot of what I call fixed signs, the qualities, back to the qualities, fixed signs. Now, fixed signs, they're very dependable, right? They're very consistent, but they don't like change, and they're stubborn in nature. That's part of their trait, okay, in general, right? But if you combine the fixed sign with, because they have Scorpios, okay, Landale's a Scorpio, they have Jason Tate's a Scorpio, right? But you also look at their main guys. Okay, and who are the main guys? Sengun, he's a Leo. Dylan Brooks, Aquarius. Jalen Green, Aquarius. And Jabari Smith Jr., who's a Taurus. And what do they all have in common? Those 4 guys, they're all fixed signs. Okay. Now, the reason why I mention that is because fixed signs, yes, they're very hardworking and they could get things done, right? But issues might arise when there's a disagreement. The reason why is because in general, not all the time, but in general, fixed signs don't like being told what to do, or they don't like change. So I can see Udoka, who is also a fixed sign, telling, hey, Dylan Brooks, we need you to do this. Or, hey, Jalen Green, we need you to do something different or do this. They'll do it. But it's not as fluid as willingly as, say, as a sign that's compatible to Ime Udoka. Now, here's one thing that I will mention. Ime Udoka took the Boston Celtics to the finals. Yes, 100%. He did a great job. But notice he wasn't, right off the bat, he wasn't like a really good team. They weren't really a good team right off. They struggled in the
struggled.
first.
Yeah, they struggled big time.
But Ime Udoka has a a Gemini moon, which is reactions. That's the moon sign, right? His emotional state. So that helps him with his flexibility and adapting. So he adapted throughout the season. But not only that, if you compare the Houston Rockets roster and the Boston Celtics roster, that Boston Celtics roster had a lot more players that were compatible to Ime Udoka.
Mm.
I'll just say it like that, okay? And I'm talking about like a good 75%. And those are the key players, right? You had, Jason Tatum. It was compatible, as far as for the quality goes, not elements, but the qualities. And these are players that are willing to change. That Boston Celtics team had a lot of mutable signs. So that's one comparison out of the two, because a lot of people will say, "Hey, Ime took this team," but yeah, I agree because he had players that are called enablers to his sign that are willing to do things that he's sort of like the student, right?
Hmm.
Whereas the Rockets are more like prideful. Yes, they're gonna do it, but they're gonna do it internally. Like they're not gonna want to willingly to. This is just their energies, right? Because deep inside they probably want to make things work, but their energies does it's just not connected that way. They're not wired that way. I think that's a good way to put it.
I do wonder if we could see the Houston Rockets struggle at the gate. And look, we've seen them through two pieces in games. I think they won both games. They've played better. The way the players are
Definitely.
moving, the way that they're using Alperen Sengun, defensively they looked a lot more cohesive. Granted, it's
Definitely.
preseason. There's a lot of actual NBA season to go, but I think what I like is that even Doka is going to give this team a lot more structure, and maybe that's what they need in that fixed sign. Now, the previous coach,
Steven Size, the
Steven
Leo
Silas,
slash Scorpio. So he's a double fix, means that he's double stubborn, right?
and that's what I
Um,
think it'll help Emo Doka that he's a Gemini. And I say that as a Gemini
yes,
myself, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a Gemini. So I think being a Gemini helps him communicate, and that's going to help him be able to work with the pieces he have, because the pieces he has a lot of talent. So I think that's where that Gemini moon is going to come in. So we'll definitely keep an eye on the Houston Rockets. It's definitely the team we both follow more out of the whole NBA. We watch a lot of NBA games, but I think we both agree about Houston Rockets
definitely.
are the number one. Um,
Rockets do have a lot
and,
of potential, though. A lot of potential, and their wild card, meaning that they can either be very, very good or not so good. But I'm leaning towards very, very good. So that's one thing to keep an eye on with the Houston Rockets. So
and watching the Houston Rockets, we're gonna be privy to see them face off against Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs 4 times a year. And Zodiac early preseason Victor Wembanyama, all I can say is just wow. More than ever, more than as advertised, more than deliver, and it's preseason, but just some of the things he's done, we have never seen someone do. Even players on the court that he's dunking on are surprised what he's doing, dunking on them. How the it's just his length, allows him to do things that nobody has ever done.
it's
I'm six
unreal.
five and I'm lengthy, and when I play against other people that aren't as tall, like they call me, man, you have some long arms. So I can just imagine an NBA player playing against Victor Wembanyama.
Ooh,
It's just ridiculous, and he can shoot. He has a touch. He has, and so, but I think coming into this season, a lot of people expected Victor Wembanyama to be good, as they expect a lot of prodigies, right? They want them to be good right away. And I think a couple reasons why Victor's going to be good right off the bat. His size, first of all, his touch. I think second of all, and this is something that you mentioned to me during the draft, is that if he were to go to the Spurs, the way that team was set up at that time made the most sense for him astrologically. And I think we've already seen in these first couple of games how they're starting to connect the players.
definitely, definitely. When he got drafted, the first thing that came into my mind, I'm like, he's gonna mesh very well with Jeremy Sohan, right? So first, Wembanyama, he's a Capricorn, right? Capricorn's a cardinal, natural leaders, right? Sohan, he's a Taurus, who is a fixed sign. Right away, I put those two together. I'm like, man, they're gonna mesh very, very good. And then a couple days later, I started seeing them hanging out and stuff like that. I'm like, man, I just knew it. The energies connect so well, almost naturally. And you see them hanging out, doing things together. I mean, didn't Wembanyama dye his hair, and stuff like that. But not only that, the San Antonio Spurs team is actually very, very scary, low key, because they also have a very, very good synergy. They're putting the right pieces, the right energies, I should say, around Victor Wembanyama. They have Vassell, who's a Virgo, Trey Jones, who's a Capricorn, Zach Collins, who's a Scorpio, Branham, Taurus. They're putting the right pieces around him that will understand him and that will connect naturally. And when they play on the floor, you'll see that fluidity almost almost like the way the Denver Nuggets were last season, right? Because Denver has an elite synergy in the Zodiac sense. So that's what I see in the Spurs. The only thing that's downfall, I think, is just experience, but it's okay. Health if healthy, this is the team to watch, and I wouldn't be surprised if they even make the playoffs or even in the top 6. That's just the way
Mm.
I see it.
Now,
So
here's where I think it could be interesting because Greg Popovich, he's in Aquarius, right, which is a fixed sign. So,
correct.
what's his moon sign, and could that help? But then again, this is Greg Popovich, so he also
Yeah,
has that respect. Immediately, a player comes in, you know what to expect, and that's also goes to his fixed sign status, right? Like he's
correct.
made the Spurs a fixed franchise, which you know what you're gonna do when you get in there.
Correct.
There are no stars. Yes, there are stars, but Greg Popovich treats them all the same. Like just because your name is
Right.
Tim Duncan doesn't mean you're not gonna get it. Like and
Yeah.
how does Greg Popovich sign play into how well this team can be chemistry
So
wise?
so Greg Popovich, he's a double Aquarius. Okay.
Double
So
Aquarius.
Aquarius is an air element, right? So whenever you have the same exact sign as your sun and the moon, it's like the amplified version of that sign. So he is like a true form of an Aquarius. Aquarius are known to be rebels. They don't like people telling them what to do, back to the fixed sign, because they are a fixed sign, right? And they do their own thing. They do it their own way, but they're stuck on ideas of what they have in mind. So that works well. And the reason why Wembanyama is a good fit for him as well, even though they are opposite elements, but he is a Capricorn Cardinal. Now, the thing with Cardinals, they're good initiators and they're good start. They like to start things, but they're not good finishers. And I'm just meaning that in energy sense. What a fixed sign does to complement a cardinal sign is that fixed signs are good at finishing things and so forth. So you combine those two together, that's a good duo right there. So energy wise, even though their elements are opposite, but they do have a good common understanding, which helps in that sense. But of course, he's well experienced. And one thing about the San Antonio Spurs, yes, they won championships, right? If you look at all their championship teams, they have a good sense of synergy as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone in that organization is actually looking into the Zodiac. I wouldn't be surprised. And the reason why I don't think people even talk about, because I have a feeling that they want to keep this on the down low, sort of like an edge, an advantage. But that's just my opinion. Okay. From what I've heard, Golden State Warriors have done something like that. They even hired a guy who's into astrology, numerology to help them win those championships, right? And I've
It is.
also
It is
heard,
definitely. The
yes,
numerology is another different
it's
way
like the
to also look
cousin.
into.
Yes, it's like the cousin version, but that guy's an expert in zodiac and astrology as well. So, I mean, it's definitely there, but I feel like organizations, they're using it as an advantage, but kind of keep it on the hush hush, right? But that's just the way I see it because through visually, whenever I'm analyzing these teams through a spreadsheet, I see a common trend over the years. I'm like, Milwaukee. Wow, so all these years, they always pick up guys that's compatible to Giannis. Denver, man, why are they picking up so much energies compatible to Jokic? And guess what? They're like year by year one of the best teams. Is that a coincidence? Who knows? But that's what makes this
Well,
platform interesting.
well. That just tells me that NBA teams should start listening to the Hoopstrology podcast so they can figure out what teams they need to pick up. I mean, what players they need to pick up, what players to trade for. And it'd be interesting if that's the case. They don't want it to get out, and maybe we're gonna be NBA team's number one villain
Exposing it.
because we're giving. Yeah, we're exposing it. We're exposing it. So, but there you have it, faithful listeners. This is the first Hoopstrology podcast episode. We're exposing the truth for how teams are putting winners together. But thank you for joining us. Zodiac GM, any last final words on this first Hoopstrology episode?
Follow us on Twitter X at the Zodiac GM and also Hoopstrology. So
Jesus _Acevedo Jr. That's me on all social media. You can follow along and come back with us next Tuesday. We're gonna be releasing a new episode every Tuesday, half hour, 4 topics to the current NBA topics and how astrology plays a role. Thank you so much for joining us on this first episode, and don't forget to subscribe. See ya.